Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm once again back with a collaboration with Chip Theory Games. I'm bringing you a Gearloc guide, and I'm very excited because this is Gale. She is one of the Gearlocs who's actually in the Unbreakable box. It's time to be covering those Unbreakable Gearlocs, and I am both anxious and excited because I know I need to get these out quick for y'all. So Gale is pretty cool. She was born in the break, and she was seriously injured in the past. However, she was saved by wind-based cybernetic augments, and these are going to make her seriously useful in battle. So we're going to look through all of her stuff. So we have got the Gearloc mat, Gale's chip with some starting health underneath, her dice set, her Gearloc reference sheet, and I know I've been using the same old battle mat for a long time, but here is the nice one from Unbreakable. Oh, so nice, so new. And I also have a new boring enemy for us to go against who doesn't have any skills that can interfere with what I'm trying to teach you, and it is a bridge troll. Very awesome. So we're going to be having fun with our new toys today. So if you look at Gale, as usual, her professions are listed here. We have her basic stats. She's a melee fighter, and we also have her innate information. So her innate ability is called Auto Mechanic. Her innate +1 is called Auto Restorer. And if you want to look at information about that, you are going to want to look on the back of Gale's Gearloc reference sheet. But essentially what this boils down to is that Gale has these things called major skill dice, and they have special effects and they enhance other dice in the profession that they're associated with. However, you need to use part of your backup plan, and we're going to circle back around to this later, to open up these spots on her map so that you can train the dice. So basically you have to spend bones in order to vacate these slots and prepare them to actually train the dice that go inside. But we're going to talk through what all of them do, and we'll revisit that when we talk about Gale's backup plan. Gale's innate +1 is called Auto Restorer, and what that means is that when she has these major skill dice and rolls them, she has the option to place them in her lock slot instead of in her active slots, and that means that a major skill die that's put there could last the entire adventure. You'll notice you're going to have to choose carefully because there's only one lock slot over here, but you can put something pretty sweet in there. For now, though, let's go ahead and go through Gale's professions. They're not necessarily listed in this order on the Gearloc sheet, but we're going to do the professions in order, and I'm going to cover the major skill dice last each time because I think that that actually caps off each of these professions well. So let's go ahead and start by talking about movement protocol, and we're going to cap it off with a discussion of her first major skill die, which is called Gust Rockets. So note, in order to train Gust Rockets in a regular game, I would need to both spend for my backup plan to clear the spot out and train at least one other die in the related profession. But let's go ahead and start with die number 1, Hit and Run. As one might expect from Too Many Bones, Hit and Run does in fact have 2 bone spaces. It also has several spaces that have basically a symbol of a person moving, and this in fact stands for Hit and Run. So what is amazing about this die is that it lets you move up to the number of positions on the die, and then you resolve the roll phase ends. So what this means is typically in a game of Too Many Bones, you move, then you select and roll and resolve your dice, but you have to move before you do anything else. You can't like attack someone and then run away unless you have something like Hit and Run. So basically what this die will do is when you roll it, when it's time to resolve it, you can move this number of spaces, but note that at that point your resolve the roll phase will end. So if you're going to smack somebody and then run away, make sure that you resolve the die where you smack them first, and then play this for a couple free moves away from them. Normally if you're going to attack an enemy in Too Many Bones, you get stuck, but Gale gets away with it. Fantastic. So that is what Hit and Run does. We're going to go ahead and put it in slot number 1. I find Hit and Run to be delightful. Gale's next die is called Sidestep, and let's go ahead and have a look at the faces on this one. Sidestep once again has a couple of bone faces, but then it also has these other faces that they're all value 1 in this case, and it looks like somebody who's leaping away. This indicates Sidestep. So this is something that you put in an active slot, and after a body's movement phase, if it moves to a position that's adjacent to you, you can exhaust this die from your active slot and then use it to move up to this number of positions. So basically, if a baddie decides to move closer to you in order to hit you, once its movement phase is over, you can be like, psych, exhaust this die, and move 1 space away, which I think is pretty fantastic. I like to imagine the baddies getting really frustrated when I do this. It just adds to the joy of this particular die. All right, so that is Sidestep. And then the third kind of normal die in this profession is called Topple. and that is going to be die number 5. So let's have a look at Topple and the faces that it offers you. So as you can see on this side, there is somebody falling over. There's a blue number, and then there will be a symbol in that lower left-hand corner. And the symbol is of a status effect. We're going to go over these very quickly. So basically what this means is that Topple allows you to place the status effect that's shown down here in the bottom left on the blue number worth of adjacent non-tyrant baddies. So for example, this side would let me stun somebody who's adjacent to me. This one is going to allow me to have a weaken effect by 1. And those are actually all of the options in the Topple die, but there are other dice that have status effects from Gale. So be on the lookout for those throughout her portfolio. In fact, the specific skills that Gale employs throughout her game of Too Many Bones are on the Gearloc reference sheet on the back at the bottom. So we're going to put Topple here. And then we are going to pretend that we did something awesome with our backup plan, which is that we cleared out the space for Gust Rockets. And if we've done so we've cleared the space out and we've trained at least one of the dice in its profession, then we can also train Gust Rockets, which is a pretty cool die. So Gust Rockets not only has its own interesting abilities, but it also can impact the other dice in its profession. So we're going to talk through that, especially because it's something that parallels these other major skill dice that we're going to look at shortly. So essentially, Gust Rockets is a die that goes in your active slot. And while it's active, when you are using dex for movement during your turn, you can actually move to diagonal positions for 1 dex per move. So for context, generally all movement in Too Many Bones is orthogonal. This new Unbreakable standalone expansion is the first time that we're seriously seeing experimentation with diagonal movement. So typically, to move, Gale would have to go orthogonally. But if she's got Gust Rockets in an active slot, then she's able to move diagonally instead. It still costs dex, but it's a much more efficient way to move depending on her needs. So in addition to expanding her options for movement, so all the sides on this die are going to have some kind of rocket, but most of the other sides are going to have an M, and that stands for major skill. So when there's a major skill in an active slot, it has the benefit of, for example, in this case, Gust Rockets, but it also gives a benefit to every other die that is in the movement protocol skill. So the major skill boosts all the other skills that are in its profession. So what that means is, once again, Gale's going to keep getting to move diagonally for as long as this is in an active slot. But the other benefit is that movement protocol profession dice are going to be boosted by +1. And that is going to last for the entire battle as long as this is in an active slot. So for example, hit and run allows you to move up to the number of positions printed on the die. If this die is active, then it's going to go from 2 to 3. Sidestep is going to be able to let Gale move away from a baddie by 2 instead of 1. And then Topple is going to let Gale place status effect dice on extra adjacent baddies. So again, this really extends the ability of the dice that are already in the profession. So that is Gale's movement protocol profession, and it is pretty fantastic. Next, we're going to go ahead and have a look at defensive protocol, which again has 3 skills that you can just train whenever you like, and then 1 that has to be unlocked, and then in order to train it, you need to have trained at least 1 other skill in the profession. So the first die in this profession is called Wind Funnel, and it's die number 3. So as usual, a couple of these faces are going to be bones, but the other sides are actually going to look like the wind funnel that the die is called. So this is something that it gets placed on a baddie. So you place it on an adjacent baddie, and then until the end of that baddie's next turn, its attack stat is the number that's on the die. So what you want to do with this is you want to use it on a baddie that can roll a lot of attack dice, and then reduce the number of attack dice that it can roll. So this die can reduce that stat down to 1 or 2. And that is Wind Funnel. The next die in this profession is die number 4, and that one is called Tornadic Barrier. And like most dice in the profession, this one has a bone side, but there's something special about this one because these are red bones. And, you know, generally if you roll dice and you don't like the result, you can choose to put them back in your skill mat and then roll them again later. If the bones are red, then they must be used in your backup plan. So if you roll this result, you've got to use it. There's also a side that has 2 red bones, which again must go to your backup plan. But the rest of the sides have a tornado and a number, and this stands for Tornadic Barrier. So these are instant dice that are used as a counter, and I'm going to show you how to use them in just a moment. But basically, you place them on an adjacent position, and at the end of the round, you can tick this die down to the next lowest number. It's exhausted when it would reach 0, or if a party member occupies the position where this die is placed. So let's do a quick example. So let's say that we have rolled a 2 on Tornadic Barrier, and that Gale's ended up here. She could place this die right here, and that would mean that the bridge troll cannot just move directly towards her. It's going to have to take a longer way around to get to Gale, because this is going to be here blocking the way. So it might move 1, 2, and then this will tick down at the end of the round, and then it can come to get Gale, but she's had time to get away by then, and this is blocked off. If you have another Gearloc that comes here, it will immediately cancel this die out. But if you are willing to kind of hold a space and you want to keep baddies out of it, then this is a really, really cool die to use, because it just gives you some more control over the environment. So that is Tornadic Barrier. And then we're going to look at the third just normally trainable die in this profession. That's die number 8. And it is called Blowback. As is customary, Blowback is going to have a couple of faces that are bones. And the rest of them will look like a blowback. I guess that's what that's supposed to look like image-wise. But what Blowback does is another active die, and you put it in your active slot. So when one or more baddies would enter the battle mat, you can exhaust this die to prevent any baddies from entering the battle mat until after the end of the next round. So if you're really trying to keep your baddies under control, then Blowback is going to be a die that gives you a really, really good break. All right, so that is Blowback. And then let's talk about the major skill in this area, which is called Macro Neural Implant. If we have used our backup plan to clear this out, and we've trained at least one of these dice, then we can do Macro Neural Implant as one of the next dice that we train. This one has a base symbol, and then again, there will be some major skill sides that offer benefits to every other skill in the profession. So here we have just the regular symbol for Macro Neural Implant. It's an active die, and while active, you are immune to several irritating status effects. So that means that Gale cannot be affected by bleed, stun, terrify, poison, or weaken. In addition, if you're on a side with this M, then each time you use another skill in the defense protocol line, then you can place a defense die with the number that's printed on here in your active slots, and this ability will last the entire battle. So basically I could place one defense die every time I use a defense protocol skill. But if this face is showing, then I can put a defense die that's worth 2 in my active slots every single time I use a defense protocol skill. So over time, that can be a really, really big bonus. And there you go, Macro Neural Implant. Now we can talk about Gale's third profession, which is called Attack Protocol. Once again, I'm going to deviate from the order that's actually printed on the Gearloc mat, because I want to talk about these 3 skills. You can train any of them: Percussive Blaster, Sonic Squall, and Disorientation Charge. Then I want to talk about the major skill and what it does for everything else in the profession. So let's go ahead and talk first about Percussive Blaster. That is die number 9. So once again, as you ought to expect, there's one bone side, but everything else represents some sort of percussive blast. And basically what Percussive Blaster does is it deals the number of damage printed on the die to an adjacent baddie. Then you can move the baddie up to 2 positions in a straight line. So you can either do 1 damage or 2 if you're quite lucky. And then again, you can move that baddie up to 2 positions in a straight line. What's very interesting about this, though, is that that does not mean that the baddie has to move in a straight line away from you. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that very quickly. When this die allows you to move a baddie in a straight line, that very literally means a straight line. So let's say that Gale is adjacent to the bridge troll. She can choose to move the bridge troll 2 in a straight line, or since it just says up to 2 in a straight line, then she could move the bridge troll this way. As long as you're moving in a straight line and it's 1 or 2 spaces, that's a legal move. So instead of pushing the baddie directly back from you, you actually have more choice over which direction you move it in. And I think that that's pretty neat. So that is Percussive Blaster. The next die in this profession is called Sonic Squall, and it is die number 13, Lucky 13. There are, in fact, no bones faces on this bad boy. There's just this Sonic Squall symbol and the numbers from 1 to 3, depending on how high you roll. So what this one does is it's an instant die, and it allows you just to do the number of damage printed on the die to an adjacent baddie. So you can do 1, 2, or 3 damage, depending on the roll. It's simple, it's efficient, it's convenient. So that is Sonic Squall. And then the last die in this particular profession is called Disorientation Charge. And that is die number 14. Once again, as usual, this one has a bones face, but everything else is a very disorienting looking charge. So as you can see, you've got this kind of lightning bolt symbol with a white 1 and a blue 1. So the way you interpret that is that this die is both an immediate use die and it's something that you place on a baddie. So first, you deal the white number in damage to an adjacent baddie. Then you place this die on the baddie. And until the end of the baddie's next turn, its defense stat is reduced by the blue number. So if we were adjacent to our bridge troll and we rolled this result, then we would do 1 damage to the bridge troll. We'd place the die on the bridge troll, and then his defense stat would be reduced by 1 until the end of his next turn. In other words, he would be defenseless. Not bad. And that is Disorientation Charge. So now let's say that we've also opened the way with our backup plan to train Arm Cannon. So again, you need to use your backup plan to clear this space, and you need to have trained at least one of the attack protocol dice in order to train Arm Cannon. But Arm Cannon is pretty darn cool, so let's have a look at what it can do. So first, you do get a very satisfying little Arm Cannon symbol, and this is another active die. While it's active, any of your skills with the text adjacent baddie can be used on any baddie. So the Arm Cannon gives you range. The other thing that's awesome is that on these other sides, the one with the major skill symbol, this gives an extra boost to every single die in attack protocol. So if you're on a side with that major skill symbol, each time you use another skill in the attack protocol profession against a baddie, you can also place the status effect die that matches the icon on this die face on that baddie. And that ability lasts for the entire battle. So this is the die where you have a greater variety of status effects that Gale's able to place. So she can do Weaken, she can do Poison, she can do Disable, she can add a Bleed effect, and no matter what, it's going to be amazing. And again, all of these status effects are described at the bottom of the back of her reference sheet. So that is Arm Cannon. It gives you range, and it allows Gale to place some scary status effects on the baddies, which is exactly what you want her to be able to do. Then Gale has a 4th profession without a major skill. This one's called Medical Protocol. And it's got 2 starting skills, each of which leads to Life Circle. So let's go ahead and start with Targeted Medboost. Then we'll do Sensory Remapper, and then we're going to go in towards Life Circle since you need one of these before you can get to Life Circle. So we'll just do what seems right in order as opposed to by die number or the order on the Gearloc reference sheet. So let's go ahead and start with Targeted Medboost. This baby, as usual, does have a die face, but everything else it does is super nice. So you'll basically have a picture of a person with little happy stars around them with a value from 1 to 3 in the top corner. And what this will allow you to do is heal any party member for the number of HP printed on the die. So you can heal anybody in your party for 1, 2, or 3 HP. There are also some other medical protocol dice, such as Sensory Remapper, which is die number 12. We'll have a look now. Sensory Remapper also has 1 bones face, but then all of these other faces have kind of an array of different status effects. So 1 grants an untargetable effect, 1 taunts, 1 causes confusion, and 1 causes daze. And again, all those different statuses are referenced on the back of Gale's Gearloc reference sheet. But what's cool about Sensory Remapper is that you can place the matching status effect die on any unit on the battle mat when you roll this. So if you get something that you like, such as perhaps untargetable, then you could put this die on an ally, a friendly unit, and then they are untargetable. But if you get something like Confuse, you would probably want to put that on a baddie. So that is Sensory Remapper, and you are in fact remapping the senses with your status dice. And then either of these can lead to Life Circle, which is a very good die. It does have 2 sides that are red bones, and that means that you do have to use these in your backup plan if you roll them. But all the other faces will be this Life Circle symbol with a value from 1 to 3. And Life Circle is a die that goes in your active slot, and it's a counter. So at the end of your turn, you heal yourself and all adjacent party members for the number of HP printed on the die. Then you reduce this die by 1. So when the number would reach 0, it would exhaust. But if this is in your active slot, you can heal yourself and every party member around you by 3. Then you take it down. Then, at the end of the next turn, you can heal yourself and everybody around you for 2, then 1, and then you're done. And even nicer is that party members includes companions, so you can also heal people's pets this way. And that is Life Circle. The last open die on here is called Self-Coder, and it is a consumable. Let's have a look at what it does. So here we have just a nice, useful 2 bones face, and 3 of the faces on this die have this image of 2 bones. However, there are 2 other sides that do something different. The side with a plug does something called a Brain Train, and it lets you reroll 1 die in your active slots. Then you can either apply the new result, or you can return the die to its previous result. So let's say that you are looking for a different status effect or for a better number on one of your major skill dice that's in the active slot. You can roll it, and if you don't like the result, you can actually just keep the old one and then try again later. Then you also have Brain Scan, and this one lets you reroll as many dice in your active slots as you wish, 1 at a time. And then for each die rolled, you can either apply the new result or return the die to its previous result. So you can just keep trying for better rolls on your active dice without any actual consequences, which I think is pretty fantastic. So that is Self-Coder, which is Gale's consumable. So now we talked about all Gale's dice, let's go ahead and talk about her backup plan. As usual, her backup plan is on the back of her Gearloc reference sheet, and she can do something for every value. So no matter how many bones you have in your backup plan, you can do something as Gale. So Gale's first ability is called Cool Breeze. It lets you roll the die removed from your backup plan to trigger this ability. So basically whatever die was here, you roll it and then you see what happens. So if it doesn't roll a bones, then you can heal for 1 HP. If it rolls a bones, then you can place it in your backup plan, but you shift all the dice down and you put it in the rightmost spot. So basically you either heal or you get to keep it, but it leaves this slot and then goes in at the end. For 2 bones, Gale can use Vent Canister. That lets her deal 1 true damage to an adjacent baddie. That's just never a bad option. True damage is your friend, unless it's being done to you, in which case it is not. For 3 bones, Gale has Mechanic Protocol, and that is where you get to remove these upgrade tokens from her major skill slots. So you need to get here in order to open up the slots for her major skill dice. And you need to do this 3 times throughout the game in order to open all of those slots up. For 4 dice, Gale has Wind Power. I really don't know how this Gearloc doesn't have any fart jokes in it. But anyway, Wind Power. She can change 1 skill die rolled this turn to the result of your choice before using it. And that is really cool, because if you're looking for something specific, maybe you want a specific kind of result on a major skill die, maybe you really want to do a certain thing or a certain status effect on one of the dice, you can use Wind Power to force that to happen. And then for 5 bones, Gale can do what's called Activate Turbine. And that means that she immediately rolls attack dice that are equal to her attack stat against an adjacent baddie. So it's like a way to get a whole bunch of extra attack all at once. And there will be times when you're really, really glad you can do it. And then with 6 bones, Gale is able to upgrade to an 8+1. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the video, that means that she is now able to put one of her major skill dice in a locked slot instead of active, so that it remains in place for the entire adventure unless she decides to remove it. So normally the major skill dice just stay in an active slot, they're there for the battle, but then you have to get the result that you wanted again. If you get an 8+1, you can lock one of them. So that is pretty much an overview of everything that Gale is able to do. So let's go ahead and talk beginner build strat, and then we'll bring this video to a close. So the first recommendation is for stats to bump up your dex and your attack first to gain a little more movement and lethality. After that, it depends on your role. You're going to go for defense and HP if you're tanking, or you need more dex if you're trying to offer support or offense. When it comes to skills, it's recommended that you work to build out one of the lines with a major skill die. So attack protocol is the best one for offense. And then you can pick up others that complement your playstyle. Regardless of build, don't sleep on Sidestep, as it provides a major boost to survivability. So if you remember, Sidestep is the one that lets you step away from baddie that's moved close to you. Pretty excellent. So that's going to bring our video to a close. As you might have noticed, Gale is able to do some very fascinating things with the power of the wind, and I think that she's really fun to play with. She can frustrate baddies at every turn, she can develop major skills that boost other skills in certain professions, and she has great consumables and medical skills as well. So she is considered much easier to play in co-op than she is in solo, but I think she's got a lot of great potential for solo players as well. So knock yourselves out, or, preferably knock the baddies out. So I'll be back soon with another Gearloc guide. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and happy gaming.